We got one more guest, one more segment here for this Wednesday edition of the program. That is Wes Reynolds, at Wes Reynolds and the number one on Twitter, contributor to the Point Spread Weekly newsletter, and also a guest host on VSIN. Wes, how's it going today, man?
Hey, Adam. How are you doing, man?
Doing very well, buddy. Appreciate your time as always. Thank you so much for joining me. And you and I were talking a little bit here before we started recording, and I'm just kind of curious about this. Now you're in Vegas, you're doing the VSIN thing, you're doing the Point Spread Weekly thing. Would you typically have started your college basketball and or NBA prep by this point in time?
Yeah, a little bit earlier. I mean, in terms of NBA prep, I've just been loosely following the preseason and whatnot. And then, college is going to start soon. It is so hard to do a lot of extended prep when we have football in full swing, and just all of these schedules are so compressed now. I mean, we've already started some NHL, and I've done a couple games on that, but I'm trying to be a little bit more choosy and selective, if you will, on NHL, because I just don't have the time to do, usually what we can do for football, because simply we don't have as much going on. So when all you have is baseball going on in the summer, that leaves you a lot of extra time to do NFL prep or college football prep. But once the game started, it is very, very difficult to do extensive prep, I guess, or at least as much as you would like on something like college basketball, and especially when there's over 350 teams. So, you are a little bit, and you are for any season that gets underway, flying blind a little bit, because you don't have any real data to go on, at least in terms of the current season. So that's what makes it, I do think, a difficult task.
Well, and the reason I bring it up, because, obviously you're fortunate enough to be able to work in this industry, and so am I. So we're able to pick up some things on the fly, be able to, do some research on the fly, or just do research for work purposes because we have to. But there are probably a lot of our listeners out there who, obviously don't work in the industry, maybe do have a change of career, a change of life, have a kid, something like that. So I guess in a very long-winded way here, I'll ask you this. With college basketball starting in less than 4 weeks, with 350 teams, is that going to lead you to focus a little bit more on the conferences that you feel like you already have a pretty good foundation of knowing?
Yeah, for the most part. And probably early on in the season, you're looking at different, because you're not really getting conference games pretty much until December. Those that have the added conference games, like the Big Ten, will have games, actual conference games in the second week of December. So, and because the first couple weeks are basically conference tournaments, or those conference openers where you have Power 5 or Power 6, if you will, in college basketball, conferences taking on middle to lower majors. So, that's where you're going a little bit off the power ratings, and either fading or following those various power ratings that are out there if you don't necessarily have the time or the wherewithal to make your own. So that's what you have to do a little bit, and then kind of evaluating the market, and maybe trying to fade certain market moves at Apex, because in college basketball it's pretty routine on totals where we're going to see 10 or 12 point moves. So the only thing that you could do is go the other way if you don't get the move right away. So that's what I'm doing there. And then plus the board has changed in college basketball, where you have now 24 conferences rather moved to the main board, and then the 8 extra game conferences that not all the shops will put up, the SWACs and the MEACs and the America East. So yeah, it's for sure a challenge, and I think the biggest challenge is really not to get overwhelmed.
Well, we'll be able to talk some more college basketball once the season begins, and once, all of us kind of put on those water wings a little bit and kind of jump into that pool. But as far as something that we've been paying attention to for a while here, let's talk some college football. And let's start on Friday night with a game that we touched on a little bit on Monday's show. We'll go a little more in depth on it here now, because there is a side that you like here in game 109-110 between West Virginia and Miami. And this is a line that started to move a little bit late last night and then into the overnight hours as well. How are you seeing this game here, Wes?
Yeah, I do like Miami, and probably will just have a small money line on this. I think this is an interesting spot, really, because you do have the Hurricanes that are 0-2 in the league, kind of in that coastal division. Of course, Clemson is by far the king in the Atlantic division, even though Wake Forest is off to a really nice start. I mean, that it's pretty much assumed that's going to be Clemson in that side of the division. But in the coastal, you really had kind of a trio of favorites that were pretty much equally priced before the season, and that was going to be Virginia Tech, Virginia, and Miami. So, I mean, those teams all play each other basically almost like a round robin, if you will. And right now, Miami 0-2. They lost to North Carolina in week 2. And then they lost last week to Virginia Tech, got down 28-0 as Jaron Williams threw 3 interceptions, went out with an arm injury. And then N'Kosi Perry, who was the part-time starter last year with Malik Rozier, was able to come in and lead them back. They actually tied the game in the fourth quarter. Actually could have went up because they were down 35-21, went for 2 and got it. And then they tie it at 35 and miss the extra point. And Virginia Tech scores with a couple minutes remaining, and Miami was driving down there and just ran out of time. But, yeah, I think this is really a do-or-die situation for Miami. And you have Virginia that does come in off the bye, but, look, they lost to Notre Dame, and I like what Bronco Mendenhall has done there, and he's improved the program every year. But I just think that this is essentially the season for Miami. If they don't win here, they're 0-3. They're down there with Georgia Tech in that ACC Coastal Division. And we've seen over the years with the ACC, I mean, they used to have that thing on the College Game Day Final show when it was Mark May and Lou Holtz and Reese Davis hosting the show, and they'd call it the ACC Wheel of Destiny because it seemed like nobody wanted to win the division. Whenever somebody got prosperity, they would lose. So, I mean, that's kind of a little bit what you're seeing, I think, on that side of the division in the ACC with the fact, look, Pittsburgh was up big on Duke last week. Duke takes the lead. Pittsburgh gets the win. So those two teams look a little bit Jekyll and Hyde. We know Georgia Tech is going to be in the cellar because they are they're the worst team, and they're rebuilding with an entirely new offense and a new coaching staff and whatnot. So Miami, this is really a must-win at this point of the season to stay out of that cellar. And, I think they get it. I think the price is enough. I think Perry is more of a veteran and looks like he's going to get the start here for Miami. And, look, we know that the Canes have offensive line issues, and they've had them all year, and they've been sacked, I think, like 25 times in the first 5 games. So, I'm just looking at this, and it's that old unranked favorite over the ranked team, and I think that this price is short enough, and you're getting Miami off a bad performance because, look, they were 2 touchdown favorites, and they didn't even come close to covering and didn't even win the game. So I think this is kind of a buy low opportunity on the Hurricanes.
I know both you and I are very astute market watchers. I mean, part of it, again, because of the jobs that we both have, but also just because it's always been something that has interested us. I know you used to do it a lot when you're playing a very high volume style. One other Friday game I want to ask you about here, just because this is a line move that kind of catches my attention here. Colorado State and New Mexico. This line kind of sat on 4, didn't really do a whole lot. And then all of a sudden, we saw it move down to 3.5, and now even some 3 favorite minus 15 money out there. It's always interesting when these really bad, almost untouchable types of teams start taking money.
Yeah, and both of these teams last week did not look very good either. New Mexico, I almost thought about taking them on principle. I ended up laying off the game, which was a good thing because when was the last time you saw San Jose State a touchdown favorite? I mean, I can't even recall because they've kind of been, I mean, maybe when the years before when Mike McIntyre was there, but that was well over several years ago. And a coaching stop in between when McIntyre went to Colorado, now at Ole Miss as the defensive coordinator. But I thought, wow, that's a lot to lay for San Jose State. And then sure enough, they ended up winning pretty easily over New Mexico. And then you have Colorado State, who lost to San Jose State, or San Diego State, rather, got pretty much dominated because and San Diego State, Colorado State, I think even took a little money because San Diego State, I think we kind of know the book on them. Fade them when they're favorites and play them when they're underdogs. And Rocky Long's always had a pretty good record as an underdog. So, yeah, this is a curious move. I haven't done a lot of delving into this particular matchup, but this is curious. And I think perhaps it's just as simple and rudimentary as bettors, or at least early bettors in the week, just okay, we got two bad teams that are seem relatively equal. We might as well just take the underdog.
Yeah, that could certainly be the case, and it does seem like there are a few games out there like that in the market here this week, and also a few games that have kind of bounced around a little bit too. As the board's been pretty active here so far. Not a whole lot of moves through key numbers or anything like that, but just some moves that kind of have grabbed my attention a little bit in a variety of these games. A couple of sides you do like here for Saturday, and ironically enough, we talked about these games in the first segment, but we'll get a difference of opinion, and I do like to crowdsource opinions here from time to time on some of these marquee games. But we talked in the previous segment with Brian Leonard about this Alabama and Texas A&M game. He took a little bit of a different stance than what it sounds like you're going to take here, as you think the underdog's a little bit interesting.
Yeah, I do. And I think we're getting to those points where you have a lot of these games and a lot of these teams before that they could perhaps face off later in the season, whether it's in the SEC championship, or we know that Alabama and LSU are going to play each other, being that they're both Western Division opponents, and Alabama Auburn are going to play each other. LSU Auburn are going to play each other because and then Georgia Florida eventually are going to play each other. So this kind of seems like it's a little bit of the calm before the storm, if you will, before we get to the real big head-to-heads where some of these SEC teams are going to beat each other up coming in once you get into November. But you look at Texas A&M, and look, I think that they're probably a year away from being a bona fide contender. They'll drop Clemson off the schedule, which will surely help. We know Jimbo Fisher has done a really good job recruiting there in College Station. They're top 5, top 10 recruiting classes both years he's been there. It still is continuing into next year. Texas A&M, if you look at them, they did cover, but they did not win at Clemson. I think they needed a backdoor as it was like 24-3 late, and then they lose at home to Auburn as a favorite. They go play an Arkansas team who had just gotten beaten by San Jose State, didn't cover against them. So this is a little bit of a buy low, I guess, on Texas A&M, and I just think the number got a little bit too high. And I don't know. I mean, Alabama, they're still putting up good numbers, but if you look at really who they've played, they really haven't played anybody. I mean, the only team that I think probably you could say is not really guaranteed, but has a more than 50% chance to make a bowl is Duke. South Carolina, they played them with a backup quarterback in his first start, Ryan Helinski, who ended up getting them back in the back door. They trounced Southern Miss. They trounced Ole Miss. So really, at least, they're not quite on Alabama's class, but this is a step up in class for Alabama. I mean, this is going to be the best opponent that they have played all year. And I think you've seen a little bit of Texas A&M money. There's still a couple 17s out there, but there's some 16.5. So, I mean, look, Texas A&M, I thought, before Alabama got in the college football playoff, really gave Alabama their best game last year. If you recall, they did cover the number, and they looked at least like they belonged on the field with Alabama, which very few teams did last season. I think Yeah, when Alabama played Texas A&M, they were 24.5. Texas A&M covered. They were pretty much in the number the whole game. So, yeah, I think that this number's a little bit generous here. I mean, I think Alabama's going to win the game, but I could see this being somewhere like a 34-24 type of game where A&M just does enough to stay within the number and stay competitive, but doesn't threaten at the end to get the outright win.
Now, another game that we talked about here in the first segment, and this time we're all going to be on the same side here. Penn State and Iowa, and we've seen a lot of push and pull with this number, opening 2.5, going up to as high as 5, coming back down to 3.5, now some 3.5s and 4s out there. But this seems like this is going to be your quintessential sharp versus public type of game, and hopefully us and the listeners here are on the right side of it.
Yeah, I like the Hawkeyes here. And this move from 2.5 to about 5, you're now seeing 3.5, 4. So it doesn't really get buyback necessarily over a key number. But I knew that there was going to be some buyback. This is one of the capsules I wrote for Point Spread Weekly this week, which comes out today, our VSIN newsletter. And I like Iowa here. I mean, look, people go on what they bet last, which is recency bias, and what they watched last. Iowa got 3 points. I had Michigan last week, and we talked about that last week, and I really liked them. And that was a sweat fest down the stretch because Minnesota couldn't get anything, or Michigan couldn't get anything going offensively, and Iowa had chances to tie that game at the end, but Michigan's defense, credit to them, they really stepped up. So you look at both of these defenses. I mean, Penn State, if you look at the rankings, they are rated number 2 in the country in scoring defense, only allowing 7.4 points a game. They're 3rd in rushing defense, just allowing over 50 yards a game, and 4th in total defense, allowing 240 yards a game. But looking at the schedule, they beat Idaho and Buffalo, and then they beat Pittsburgh, and Pittsburgh still was only in like their 3rd game of learning this new system that they're running because Mark Whipple's the OC there. So Pitt is being a more pass-happy team. They were more run-oriented last year. They did go out and shut out Maryland, which was an impressive performance, but they also played Purdue last week with their 2nd-string quarterback, with their 2 of their key receivers out. And obviously Purdue's defense is really banged up. So Penn State, look, James Franklin likes to play that bully role, and he's pretty good at it, covering those big numbers. But Iowa, I don't think as a team he's going to be able to bully. When you look at that defense, they're 5th in the country at only allowing 254 yards a game, and 3rd in scoring defense, only allowing just under 9 points a game. So this Iowa defense is really good. This is an experienced senior quarterback who did not have his best game last week. I think he had a 150-some pass streak broken with interceptions last week. But Nathan Stanley's been down this road before, and they've already proven that they can win these tough games. They did win a tough game in Ames in the Cyhawk game against Iowa State, and look, had their chances at Michigan, but couldn't get it done. Sean Clifford, really talented for Penn State, but this is by far the biggest challenge of his career to go on the road. And I just think that Penn State was kind of a forgotten about team, and then they cover a couple big numbers, and now everybody loves them and think, oh, this team's a real dark horse in the Big Ten, and maybe they are. But I'm going to go with the team that did not look great last week in Iowa, and I still think that you're getting value over the 3 here with the Hawkeyes.
Yeah, I think so too. I do like Iowa. I caught a 4.5 on them and played it, I believe it was yesterday or 2 days ago. So I'm on board with Iowa. And again, I mean, Iowa's a team, and I've talked about this a lot here on the show. They never beat themselves. You have to go out there and beat them. I don't know if Penn State's capable of doing that here in a pretty tough road spot for them, where you've got an Iowa team that, is looking to bounce back from a pretty lackluster performance last week. I think Ferentz and the boys do that. I like Iowa. And like you said, I think Iowa probably wins the game outright too. So that's one of those sprinkle the money line types of spots there, I think. You get a 4 or 4.5, sprinkle the money line too. I do like that look here in college football for week 7. Let's go over to the NFL side here for week 6. And this is another game that I like. And I think that I'm going to wind up being on this side as well. I don't know about it from a contest perspective yet. We'll see what those numbers end up looking like. But 255, 256, the Seahawks and the Browns. And I think I'm just going to sit here and nod my head with everything you say about this game.
Well, and this is one of those clearly you're buying low on the Cleveland Browns with what we saw. I mean, we saw a lot of sharp money, at least early on, take the 49ers, and then I think there was some piggybacking off that, and the Browns never really challenged them. The 49ers got the running game going, and the Browns made a couple mistakes early, and then this game was pretty much over by halftime. But and we also know, watching the Cleveland Browns, hey, they've got a little bit of issues. Baker Mayfield is erratic. The offensive line, much like several offensive lines in the NFL, has some problems, and they really got beat up front by the 49ers. But this is one of those buy low things, and I don't know if I'll use it for the contest. I probably will bet it personally, and I will certainly use it as teaser fodder, because when I was doing the Green Zone, and we were talking with a couple guests, the bookmakers that we talked to on the show, Cleveland was about a 2.5 point favorite going in, and now they're about 2-point underdogs. So you've seen that favorite flip here, and this for sure is a good teaser filler game. I mean, you want to tease that, you can now tease it up depending on if you play 6 or 6.5 or 7-point teasers, how much juice you want to lay. This is one of those you can now tease through the 3 and the 7. So the teaser, I think, is the best play, because it's like, okay, I'm going to get the Browns as over touchdown underdogs. Okay, I will go ahead and take that. And this is what I think the Browns are going to be. And I don't think the enthusiasm on the Browns going into the season was totally misplaced. I just think it went overboard. I think the fact that, this team's got a lot of talent, and they've acquired all this talent, so they're a Super Bowl contender. They got to go through growing pains first and learn how to win. And this is a team with a new head coach, with a new offensive coordinator, and a new defensive coordinator. This takes time. I think going forward into the next year or 2 years down the line, this team will be a bona fide contender in the AFC. But this is the year where you're going to see them be really Jekyll and Hyde. You're going to see them look awful. I mean, and they've had 2 primetime performances this season where they haven't looked great. And really, that Rams game, they still had a chance to win, or at least tie in the end. I think they kind of botched the play calling because they had 1st and goal from the 4, and I believe 3 timeouts, or at least 2 timeouts with about a minute to go. So they completely botched that. And really, probably at the bare minimum, should have sent that game to overtime with the Rams. So then everybody goes against him, and Rex Ryan comes out with the Baker Mayfield is overrated comment, which he's probably at least partially right about at this point. And then they go out and lay waste at Cleveland when they were touchdown underdogs. And then they go out to San Francisco, 2nd straight road game, never an easy spot, and absolutely lay an egg and only score 3 points. So, yeah, I think you're getting a team buying low here. And then look, the Seahawks end up getting a win over the Rams. They had lost 3 straight to those guys, and really, I think, wanted that game very badly in the Thursday night game to kind of say, hey, we're still here. Now you go on the road to Cleveland. I think it's a little bit of a tough spot for them, and I think the Browns are the right side. I think maybe you wait a little bit if you want to take the Browns in terms of a side. I don't know if it's going to get to 3. There could be some resistance before it gets there. But this is certainly, I think, one of the prime teaser candidates on the Week 6 board.
I do like a lot about this game, all the reasons that you mentioned. Then also, I just think schematically, this sets up a little bit better for Cleveland, where Seattle's offense is run the football and kind of improvise with Russell Wilson. Seattle's defense gets no pass rush whatsoever. That should help Baker Mayfield a little bit. And also, they should be able to get Nick Chubb going, too, because the problem with last week is that you couldn't really use Chubb because you were trailing so badly in that game so early on. And they've had a lot of success running the football with Chubb, because they've got guys you have to worry about like Landry and OBJ on the outside. So I think Cleveland just has a much better all-around spot here from the scheduling standpoint, even though it is a short week, but especially schematically here in this one. I think things do set up really, really well for them. One other game on your mind here in the NFL this week, 265, 266, 49ers and the Rams. And you like the home favorite Rams a little bit here.
I do, and I would like to see 3, but this is probably something I would play the money line on, and not looking in front of me, I would guess the money line on a 3.5, probably about 180, 185, somewhere in that range. This is that old proverbial, and I take this because I want to credit him on this. If you've ever heard Alan Boston on interviews talking about college basketball, and this is where I first heard it from, and he calls this the show 'em who's boss game. And what this is basically is you have a team that is the best team in their division or their conference, really historically, or at least over the last few years. And all of a sudden, they've shown a little bit of vulnerability, like the Rams have, losing 2 in a row. And now you get the plucky upstart who's obviously improved and has shown a little bit of mettle. And now they're coming in and they're getting a little bit more respect. And that would be the San Francisco 49ers. I mean, look, I like the 49ers. I bet them on a prop to make the playoffs this year. I took their overseas wins. So I'm not down on the 49ers, but I think that this is a spot where maybe the Rams kind of look and say, okay, not yet. We're not ready to cede this throne, because we've had this discussion numerous times on this podcast. Is this a show 'em who's boss game, or is this a changing of the guard game? And I'm not willing to say that this is a changing of the guard game yet on the Rams. And look, the NFC is totally wide open this year. I mean, there's no defined favorite like there is in the AFC with the Patriots, where I think clearly most people would have them the number 1 power-rated team in the AFC. In the NFC, you have a lot of teams in the mix here. It almost is easier to list the teams that are not in the mix in the NFC than the teams that are. I mean, even the teams that have lost 2 in a row, like the Rams, like Dallas, you don't want to throw those teams in the garbage here. And this line, I think, when I was looking Monday night, was the look-ahead line before the market pretty much put prices up, when you might have had a quarter or half of the prices up. This was like 4.5. So the 49ers got a little bit of respect here, which you had to do. You had to make an adjustment off that performance and off the fact that they were 4-0 and they weren't fat and happy being 3-0. So they adjusted that for the marketplace. But yeah, I do like the Rams here. And one of the things that we've seen early on, Adam, is that the road underdogs have been doing a hell of a lot better than the home favorites in terms of covering games. Books have had a couple good weeks in that regard. But like most things, eventually there's going to be at least some regression. It's not going to regress to where it's like 50-50. I mean, some years the overs are going to win. Some years the unders are going to win. Some years the underdogs are going to win more, and some years the favorites are going to win more. But I do think you're going to get some regression spots on some home favorites that look kind of cheap here. And I think that this Rams team looks awful cheap in this spot, even off 2 losses where they had that home loss to Tampa Bay when they were almost double-digit favorites, and then this game. Both teams, I think, are relatively healthy, but everybody has a couple key injuries at this point. All 32 teams in the NFL have that, but yeah, I think you're getting a relatively cheap price here on the Rams.
All right, so we spend a couple of minutes on golf to finish up this Wednesday show in this segment here with Wes Reynolds, and that's the Houston Open. And this event used to be the week before the Masters. Now it's in the fall as part of the wraparound portion of the 1920 PGA Tour season. Last time for this one here at the Houston Golf Club. It'll move for next year. Henrik Stenson, the biggest name far and away here in this field. He's about 9.5 to 1 or so. Everybody else, 20 to 1 or higher. So I presume you went price hunting a little bit here this week, Wes.
Yeah, a little bit. And this event is a very weak field by this standard. The Houston Open's got a lot of history on this tour. Been around since 1946. But you mentioned it. This was always usually the week before the Masters, either in late March or early April. The course kind of resembles a little bit to try to give you a somewhat of a test for the Masters. So you usually have very fast greens here, and it got moved to the fall schedule. Actually, Jim Crane, the owner of the Houston Astros, kind of helped save this event from extinction. It's going to move to a new course next year that he's fundraising for. They're still trying to find a title sponsor, but yeah, you've got a better field actually in the Italian Open than you do here. So I did go a little bit of price hunting. I played a couple shorter prices, one being Brian Harmon, who is 25 to 1. So you're not getting a real bargain there, but that was more, I guess, of a form play, if you will, looking at how he's been playing coming in. And he was a guy I had last week, didn't end up contending, but he's missed the cut actually 4 times in 6 tries here. And the course form's not good, but the recent form's good. You look over his last 24 rounds, number 1 on the tour in strokes gained total, number 1 on strokes gained tee to green, and number 1 in strokes gained ball striking. And he's also in the top 20 in strokes gained off the tee, strokes gained approach, strokes gained putting, strokes gained around the green, 18, 14, and 3rd in his last 3 events. Denny McCarthy, another one, 35 to 1, always a really good putter, leading in strokes gained putting and scrambling and the like. But the ball striking has come back. And 31st at Greenbrier, 18th at the Sanderson, and then a T9 last week at the Shriners, where he was on the first page of the leaderboard for a lot of Sunday. 6 top 25s since the end of June. This was a guy that I think can go well. Lanto Griffin's another form guy. Missed the cut in his only appearance here last year, but his last 5 events, 18th, 17th, 11th, 13th, and 7th. So this is a guy that's been maybe knocking on the door of a breakthrough. And then a couple longer shots. I did play like 3 guys at 100 to 1 or more this week. Doc Redman, who's ball striking's been good over the last several events, former U.S. Amateur champion at 100 to 1. And then I took a couple Ben Hogan Award winners, which is awarded to the best male college golfer of the year. And they were back-to-back guys back in 2018 and 2017, respectively. Just got their cards off the Corn Ferry Tour, and that's Doug Gim, the former U.S. Amateur runner-up who played his college golf at Oklahoma, and Maverick McNeely, who, of course, won the Hogan Award while he was at Stanford. And both those guys are around 150 to 1. So this is a week, Adam, as you were saying at the top. You maybe want to do a little speculation here and not necessarily just take favorites, because there really are no favorites at this event, with Ian Poulter, the defending champion, electing to go over to Italy and play in that event instead of defending his Houston Open title.
Wes Reynolds is working and find on Twitter at Wes Reynolds and the number 1. Also the VSIN Point Spread Weekly. And you can hear him on the air. Wes, how can people check you out on the air or in that newsletter?
Okay, newsletter comes out today, and you can go to vsin.com/subscribe for more information on that. In terms of the on air, we do the Green Zone, myself and my usual partner, Brady Cannon. And Monday nights, 6 to 10 Pacific, usually during the Monday night football game. Thursday and Friday, also 6 to 10 Pacific. And then on the weekends, we're there during the middle of all of the games, 2 to 6 Pacific on Saturday for the college football, and 3 to 7 on Sunday for the NFL. So mainly the time we're on the air is that second half late window and then into the Sunday night game.
Well, once again, Wes, you can find him on Twitter at Wes Reynolds with the number 1 and find him on VSIN there as well. Wes, I appreciate your time as always, man. Thank you so much for joining me. We'll talk to you again next week.
All right, Adam, you bet.